With a single touch, with the light movement of one fingertip, 4 major international airports across the United States came to a complete stop, frozen, as if gripped by an invisible hand. In that suspended moment, Lauren Harris sat squeezed into a cramped economy seat, her perfectly tailored navy suit pressed awkwardly between 2 strangers. No one around her knew that the woman stuck in seat 34B. The woman brushed aside by the check-in agent and downgraded to economy, despite having a first-class ticket, was the same woman who could cripple an entire airline with a single technical command. She looked at her phone screen as a confirmation line slid across it. Diagnostic protocol activated. 29 minutes and 58 seconds. 4 major airports. Hundreds of flights. 1 woman. But to understand what drove Lauren to press that button, we need to return to the morning when everything was still calm. Early sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her 52nd floor penthouse, washing the room in a soft golden glow. Lauren stood in the center of that bright space, her deep brown eyes reflecting the Seattle sky. Her suit hung neatly on its rack. Her Rimowa suitcase lay open on the bed, each item inside arranged with careful, almost obsessive precision. Today was not just another business trip. Today could be the day Aerosync Systems, the company she had built from nothing, expanded into both the European and Asian markets. The deal had taken more than a year to assemble, and if finalized, her company would double in value overnight. But Lauren didn't tremble. She was too familiar with standing in rooms where everyone silently assumed she did not belong. She had learned to hide her trembling beneath sharp edges and cold fabric. She had learned to turn condescending looks into fuel. She had learned to smile when the world tried to remind her that her place should always be lower. And most importantly, she had learned how to fight without ever falling. A chime rang. Lauren tapped her Bluetooth earpiece. "I'm here, Aunt Margaret." The warm but firm voice of Dr. Margaret Cole, the greatest mentor of Lauren's life, came through the speaker. "Lauren, today is important. I know you prepared well. But there is something I want to remind you, and you need to hear it. The higher you climb, the harder they try to pull you down." Lauren paused, her eyes falling to the faint scar on her wrist, a reminder of the night she stayed awake for 3 days, fixing a system failure, while the executive in charge, a white man in his 50s, poured cold water on her efforts with the words, "I don't trust a young woman of color to handle this." She inhaled slowly and replied, her voice calm but heavy, with invisible wounds, "I have heard that for 20 years. "And you are still here," Margaret's voice softened. "Because you were born to break that ceiling." Lauren let out a small smile. "I just want the meeting today to go smoothly." Margaret let out a low chuckle. "You forget something. People who want to pull you down never leave you in peace." Lauren stayed silent. Some truths do not need answers. As the call ended, her phone buzzed. A new email appeared. From Stephen Adler, COO of Stratocore Technologies. Subject about your international deal. Lauren opened it. A single line of good luck, written in a tone that was half mocking, half taunting. "I hope your small team can handle the pressure of global expansion." A faint smile touched Lauren's lips, a smile without warmth. Stephen had tried to block her path many times, had dismissed her company, had hoped Aerosync would fail, and the email was simply another way of saying, "You are not qualified to sit at the big table." She deleted it instantly. No reaction. No irritation. Because Lauren had learned this, You do not argue with people who are already losing. When she came downstairs, her driver, a middle-aged man named Paul Henderson, was waiting beside the luxury sedan. He smiled. "Beautiful morning, Miss Harris, good omen." Lauren nodded and stepped into the car, but the moment she leaned back into the seat, a strange sensation brushed through her mind. Not fear. Not a bad omen. Just a very clear feeling. Today would not go as planned. She did not know why, but her body knew. The car glided across the bridge into the flow of traffic toward Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Lauren closed her eyes for a moment to steady her breath. Old memories flashed like a rewinding film. The humid rental room where she grew up with her mother, the nights her mother worked late at a convenience store until 2 in the morning, the old computer Lauren used at 13 to learn programming through YouTube videos, the project groups at Stanford, where she was the only black student, the frowns when she pitched AeroSync for the first time, the faces filled with doubt, the whispers, the glances that spoke louder than words. Lauren had survived all of it and had risen to the top. But she didn't yet know that within hours the world would try to push her down once more, that once again she would be underestimated, and once again they would make the greatest mistake possible when misjudging a person they did not know who she truly was. When the car stopped at the first-class entrance of Aurora Air, everything seemed normal. Porters pushing luggage announcement chimes echoing overhead, the smell of coffee drifting from a nearby shop. Lauren stepped out, her posture straight, her steps steady, her eyes sharp as a polished blade. No one knew that this woman carried a command capable of shutting down their entire system. No one knew she controlled 70% of Aurora Air's operational network. No one knew she could, if she wished, push the airline to the brink of chaos in 30 minutes. They saw only the surface, only her skin, only a suit that was refined, but not ostentatious. They assumed she was just someone. Lauren drew a long breath, pulled her suitcase, and walked toward the priority check-in lane, unaware that in just 90 minutes, everything would be stretched to its breaking point, and the skies over America would be forced to stand still because of one mistake made by the very people who underestimated her. The moment Lauren stepped into the first-class check-in area, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Not in a welcoming way, but in the way a room seems to breathe slower when someone they do not want to see appears. Aurora Air's first-class counter was designed like a luxury hotel, polished wooden desk staff in light grey suits, warm golden lighting. The line was short, only an elderly couple being assisted, and a few business travelers with leather briefcases. Lauren pulled her suitcase toward the first-class line. She had walked this exact path dozens of times from Seattle to New York, from New York to London, from San Francisco to Tokyo. Never once had a staff member asked, "Are you sure you're in the right line?" But today would be different. Today everything would flip to a page Lauren never expected. When her turn came, she stepped to counter number 3. Behind it was Tyler Boone, a new check-in agent in his early 20s, hair slicked with gel, a smile trained to look friendly to guests, but only to those he believed deserved it. The smile vanished the moment he saw Lauren. Only the assessing eyes remained cold, stripped of goodwill. "Good morning," Lauren began, politely handing over her ID and showing her boarding pass on her phone. "I'm checking in for my first-class flight to JFK." Tyler glanced at the ID, then at Lauren's face, then back down again, as if searching for something that did not match. He tapped a few keys, but not to check her information, only to buy time. Lauren tilted her head slightly, observing him with the same calm authority she used when negotiating million-dollar contracts. But Tyler did not see, or did not want to see, that woman. He only saw a black passenger, a woman who did not look like the type he believed belonged at the first-class counter. "You said first class," Tyler repeated, emphasizing every word, his mouth forming a faintly irritated smile. "Yes," Lauren answered, still steady. "Are you sure? Because the line over there is for economy check-in." Lauren didn't flinch. She only felt tired, a familiar kind of tired, the exhaustion of constantly having to prove she belonged in places she had already paid to belong to. She held her phone closer. The QR code was clear. The text on the screen read, "First class, seat 2A." Tyler squinted, as though he were reading something complicated. Then he said the words that made the room feel heavier. "I don't see you on the first class list." The room seemed to freeze. Lauren knew that sentence well. It was the first step in a discriminatory routine she had heard many times, seen many black travelers experience a line that often left people silent out of fear of causing trouble, fear of being labeled problematic. Lauren no longer felt afraid. She rotated the phone once more. "The information on my boarding pass is clear. If your system has an issue, you should check it again." Tyler faltered for half a second before pretending to be composed. "Let me call a supervisor." Lauren said nothing. She stood, tall eyes steady. She was not the type to bow her head and wait. She was the type that made white male executives' hands shake when signing contracts with her. But Tyler did not know that, or he knew, and did not care. A minute later, Rachel King, the shift supervisor, approached. A woman in her 30s, slender frame, blonde hair in a high ponytail, a cold smile. She did not look at Lauren. She did not speak to Lauren. She did not greet Lauren. She turned to Tyler and asked, "What's the issue?" Lauren tilted her head. She recognized that tone. She had heard it in conference rooms when people discussed her as if she were not present. Tyler replied, emphasizing 3 particular words. "She believes she has a first-class ticket." Lauren clearly saw the silent exchange between them, an unspoken agreement that the problem was not the system, but her. Rachel finally faced Lauren with a false professional smile. "May I see your ticket confirmation?" Lauren handed over everything: boarding pass, confirmation, email, payment details. All identical, all saying first class 2A. Rachel looked them over, once, then spoke words that made Lauren's scalp prickle. "Oh, the system shows economy." "Impossible," Lauren answered, not raising her voice but cutting sharp. "I booked this 3 weeks ago. First class, seat 2A. Rachel lifted a brow. "Maybe you selected the wrong option when booking." Lauren looked straight into her eyes. "Do you think I don't know what I purchased?" Rachel looked away. "Well, either way, first class is full now. You can sit in economy or book another flight." Lauren glanced at her watch. She had only a few hours until her meeting with international investors. Missing this flight meant missing the chance to expand globally. She asked, "May I speak to the lead agent or the captain?" Rachel shook her head instantly. "They're busy," a clumsy lie, a refusal delivered with intent, and all around them, white passengers continued checking in at the next counters with no delays, no extra questioning. No, "Are you sure you're in the right line?" No suggestion to just sit in economy. Lauren took a long breath, not to control herself, but to record this moment, because she knew it would become evidence. She took photos of their name tags. She saved every confirmation she had. Then she said clearly, "I will need your full names." Tyler let out a smug chuckle. Rachel forced a stiff smile. Lauren looked at them with a gaze that had made senior executives look away in discomfort. But these two did not understand. They did not know who she was. They did not know they had put the wrong person in the wrong place. They did not know they were cornering a woman who had real power. A woman who would come back and drag their entire system down. As Lauren walked away from the counter, Rachel muttered under her breath, "Another one acting like she's important." Tyler laughed. People like that always causing trouble. Lauren heard every word, but she did not turn back. She didn't need to, because only a few hours later, the same people who laughed behind her back would be standing in the middle of chaos, unlike anything Aurora Air had ever seen. And they would finally understand not everyone in economy is powerless, and sometimes the person pushed to the last row is the one who can bring the entire sky to a halt. The aisle felt like a narrow tunnel stretching endlessly ahead. Lauren pulled her suitcase through the cramped rows of seats, each step slicing away the last remnants of calm she had left. Every time she brushed lightly against an armrest, a passenger glanced up, not out of annoyance, but because they were unaccustomed to seeing a woman in a tailored luxury suit walking through economy with that kind of unshaken resolve. Yet no one knew the real reason. No one saw what was burning quietly behind her steady eyes. Lauren stopped at row 34, the middle seat, 34B. One of the seats she had believed she had left behind years ago. Yet today it waited for her like a cruel reminder. The man in 34A, headphones on, did not bother to look up. The woman in 34C was asleep against the window, her breathing slow and even. Lauren sat down carefully, her legs wedged in place, her knees pressed tightly against the seat in front. No room to breathe. No room to open her laptop. No space to hold what was left of her dignity after it had been scraped raw at the check-in counter. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. But the discomfort did not fade. It merely curled up inside her like a caged animal waiting for the chance to break loose. The plane vibrated lightly as it prepared for taxi. Flight attendants began checking seat belts. One of them, Emily Saunders' blonde hair, neatly pinned up the same woman whose smile had been soft and sweet when greeting first-class passengers, now walked into the economy cabin with a completely different expression. When she reached row 34, her eyes landed on Lauren. Lauren offered a small, polite smile. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Could I have a bottle of water before takeoff? A simple request." Gentle, not demanding. Melly paused for half a second, long enough to reveal her hesitation. Then the smile disappeared. "We will serve after reaching a stable altitude." Her voice was flat firm, stripped of the softness Lauren had seen when she served white passengers up front. Lauren nodded lightly. "Thank you." But 5 minutes later, before the plane had even taken off, Lauren watched Emily hand a chilled bottle of water to an elderly white man in row 31, her voice warm and tender as she said, "Here you go, sir. It is a long flight today." The man smiled. Lauren watched for a few seconds, then turned away. Injustice is not always a slap. Sometimes it is just a bottle of water given to someone else right in front of you. The engines roared as the plane lifted off the ground. Lauren closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath, but her heartbeat thumped harder with each passing minute. She tried to do what she had always done over the years, swallow it, smile, keep working, stay professional. But this time it was harder. Much harder. When the plane reached stable altitude, Lauren opened her laptop to document what had happened. She began typing date, time, location, staff behavior. Each keystroke fell onto the page like a fragment of something breaking apart. Suddenly 2 voices rang out directly behind her. Not accidental, not whispered, but loud enough for Lauren to hear clearly. Emily, and another flight attendant. Who does she think she is? Emily said, her voice dripping with disdain. That attitude, like someone owes her a first-class seat. The other attendant laughed. They're always like that. Get one nice thing and they think they own the whole plane. Emily lowered her voice, but Lauren heard every word. First class is not for everyone. Some people need to know their place. A brief silence followed. Lauren's heart turned cold. Something inside her froze. She looked forward, eyes open. Not because she was surprised, not because she was shocked, but because she felt exhausted down to her bones. Exhausted from proving she deserved her place in every boardroom. Exhausted from suppressing her anger so she would not be labeled aggressive. Exhausted from knowing that every step she climbed came with someone trying to push her back down. Lauren placed a hand over her chest, feeling her heartbeat racing against her anger. A part of her wanted to stand up, turn around and ask, why am I unworthy of first class? My skin color? My gender? Or because you believe my place is in seat 34B? But she did not. Not because she was weak, but because she had lived too long in a world where every reaction from a black woman was exaggerated, distorted, and remembered longer than the wrongdoing that caused it. Instead of speaking, Lauren wrote. She moved her draft into the executive team group. She added legal affairs. She added research. And then she typed a new line, collect data on systemic discrimination at Aurora Air over the past 5 years, priority black passengers in business and first class. She pressed send. In that moment, Lauren Harris stopped enduring and began preparing to strike back. 20 minutes later, the first response arrived. Then the second. Then the third. Lauren opened each one, her eyes darkening. Multiple similar complaints recorded. Most involve black passengers. Clear discriminatory pattern. Not the first time first-class seats were reassigned. A final line appeared from the head of research, April. Lauren, this is not an incident. This is a system. Lauren sat still, her hands tightening. For the first time during the flight, she did not feel anger. She felt clarity, a cold, razor-sharp clarity. The clarity of someone who had endured too much for too long. A dangerous clarity. She closed her laptop. She looked out the window at the vast blue sky, flawless, boundless, free of borders, free of discrimination, free of judgment. Ironic, because the very people running this sky-bound world had tried to trap her in a cramped seat, simply because they believed she did not deserve anything else. Lauren whispered, barely audible, "This time will be different." And in that moment, a decision was made, silent, but sharp as a vow. A decision that would force the entire Aurora Air system to bow. The plane's wheels touched down on the JFK runway with a light jolt, but Lauren felt it like a blow straight to her chest. She did not rush to unbuckle her seatbelt. She did not rush to stand. She did not rush to leave the seat 34B she had been forced to sit in for 5 long hours. She stayed still, breathing slowly, holding the fire inside her chest so it would not erupt too soon. The plane came to a full stop. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, brushing her cheek with a pale gold glow, but it did nothing to soothe the scratches left inside her. Lauren unlocked her phone. 3 more emails from research had arrived. One short message from Daniel Price, Chief Counsel. We need to talk. Urgent. No emotion. No wasted words. But Lauren knew that tone. It never meant something small. She stepped off the plane. First-class passengers walked ahead, greeted with bright smiles. Lauren walked behind, swallowed by the crowd, unnoticed. But it no longer mattered. The person the entire system was about to notice was the same woman quietly stepping out of seat 34B. When she reached the terminal, her driver was already waiting. But instead of going to the hotel, Lauren said only one sentence. "Take me to the Hudson Grand. Daniel is waiting." Her voice was unnervingly calm. Too calm, the calm of a storm before it sweeps everything clean. Hudson Grand Hotel Private Meeting Room, 28th floor. Lauren pushed the door open. Daniel Price was already there, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal grey suit, carrying the sharp presence of someone who could dismantle an entire boardroom's argument with one sentence. But today, Daniel's expression was even more serious than usual. "You're here," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "Sit. There's a lot we need to go over." Lauren placed her bag down and sat upright. "Start," she said. Daniel opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. It showed complaint files, charts, surveys, everything research had just sent. But Daniel did not begin with the data. He began with the people. "Lauren, you're not the only one," he said, his voice dropping lower. "This system has mistreated more than 27 black executives in the last 18 months. Same pattern, same methods, same airline." Lauren said nothing, but her eyes narrowed. Daniel continued. "They were asked for extra documents, accused of having fake tickets, downgraded to economy because of a system error, ignored by staff. Some were even flagged to security. All cases trace back to Aurora Air." Lauren placed a light hand on the table. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from feeling the heat of her anger creeping under her skin. Daniel slid another file toward her. Complaints ignored. Evidence lost. No one held accountable. They believed none of this would ever come to light. Silence. Lauren looked at the pages. These were not data points. They were pieces of lives. Lives repeating the same injustice she had just endured. She inhaled deeply. What else? Daniel switched to another email. "This one is more important." April intercepted it. Lauren read it, and her eyes froze instantly. An email from Stratocorp sent to a terminal manager at Aurora Air. The contents a suggestion to pay attention to a VIP passenger named Lauren Harris, a request to thoroughly verify her information, and a reminder that Aurora Air was about to be offered a new system, implying that cooperation would be mutually beneficial. Lauren whispered, barely audible. Stephen Daniel nodded. He interfered. "There is a strong possibility they intentionally caused trouble to target Skylink OS before the contract renewal." The air in the room thickened. Lauren placed both hands on the table. She closed her eyes for 1 second, only one. When she opened them, the exhaustion was gone. The restraint was gone. The compliance was gone. All that remained was unwavering resolve. "Do we have camera footage from C?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "Downloading now. Paul at headquarters is helping. Legal team, ready for a full-scale complaint." Lauren stood up. The entire room seemed to change as she rose, not because her posture shifted, but because her intent did. Sharp, cold, uncompromising. "Daniel," she said, "how many people were treated the way I was today?" "At least 27. And all of them stayed silent." "Yes." because they had no power to fight back. Lauren walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window, staring down at the glowing city below. She whispered, "But I do." Daniel watched her from behind. He knew this moment. He had seen it when Lauren convinced an investment committee that did not believe a black woman could lead a tech company. He had seen it when she rewrote an entire flight coordination system in 3 days to save an airline from collapse. A Lauren like that, once she decided, never stopped. Lauren turned back toward the table, her voice sharp as a blade being drawn. "Who do they think I am, Lauren? Do they think I am some weak woman sitting in seat 34B? You need to stay calm. No, Daniel. I have stayed calm my entire life." Her voice was strong, short, cutting through the air. "I have spent my entire life being patient, just to stay in rooms they believed I did not belong in. My entire life proving I was good enough, kind enough, safe enough, just to be treated like a human being. My entire life staying silent in situations others will never face." Lauren placed her hand over her chest, where her heart was pounding. "I have done everything the right way for 20 years. Her eyes ignited. "But now I understand this: the powerful do not respect patience. They only respect consequences." Daniel stayed silent. He knew what was coming next was not a reaction, but a calculated retaliation, and likely a massive one. Lauren looked at him, her voice low but decisive. "Get ready. Tomorrow Aurora Air will face a consequence they have never imagined." And then she said the sentence that sent a chill down Daniel's spine. "Activate the emergency diagnostic across the entire system. I will give the command when it is time." Daniel swallowed. "Lauren, that step will create 30 minutes of chaos," Lauren finished his sentence. "And in those 30 minutes, they will understand the price of underestimating a black woman." The room fell silent. Not a peaceful silence. A silence heavy with the beginning of a war. Lauren grabbed her bag and walked out of the meeting room. The door closed behind her. And that was the moment the world began counting down, counting to the moment when Lauren would bring the sky itself to a halt. Night fell over Manhattan like a thick velvet curtain, neon lights reflecting across the glass walls of Lauren's hotel suite at the Hudson Grand. She sat at the desk, eyes fixed on the final report research had just delivered. Cold numbers lined up in rows, repeated testimonies, identical humiliations. And at the center of it all was a bitter truth: Lauren was not the first victim. But she would be the last to let it continue. She placed the documents on the table. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from anger that had been held back far too long. At that moment, her phone vibrated. Caller ID Aurora Air Customer Relations. Lauren stared at the screen for a second, her eyes darkening. She pressed speaker. "This is Lauren Harris." A man's voice, trying too hard to sound polite, came through. "Hello, Ms. Harris. This is Benjamin Cole from Aurora Air Customer Relations. I am calling regarding the misunderstanding that occurred in Seattle this morning." Lauren paused for a beat. "Misunderstanding," she repeated, emphasizing the word, as if testing how much truth they were willing to avoid. Benjamin continued reading from a script. "We apologize if your experience was less than satisfactory. Aurora Air is committed to serving all customers fairly, and we would like to offer a gesture of goodwill in the form of a $200 voucher toward your next flight." Lauren laughed. Not loudly, not for long. A laugh sharp enough to cut like glass. "Mr. Cole," she said slowly, "do you believe the humiliation I endured today is worth $200? Benjamin faltered for half a second before recovering his professional tone. I am simply following protocol, Ms. Harris. There is no evidence indicating the incident involved any form of bias. Lauren leaned back, her eyes turning cold. No evidence. She opened her laptop, pulling up the list of complaints, badge photos, ticket confirmations, and camera footage. Would you like me to email it now? Or should my legal team do it for me? Benjamin hesitated. Then, in a voice far less confident, he said, I cannot verify that. If you wish to file a formal complaint, we can forward it to our legal department for review, Lauren replied, with a calmness that was far more dangerous than anger. Good. Forward it. And forward it literally, because after tonight, your legal department will not have time to breathe. Benjamin tried to regain authority. Ms. Harris, if you are implying Lauren cut him off. Mr. Cole, let me be clear. I was denied my first-class seat, not because of a system error. Not because of a mistake. Not because of an overbooking. She emphasized every word. But because of my skin color. Silence filled the other end. Not the silence of someone taking responsibility. The silence of someone realizing they were speaking to the wrong person. Lauren ended it with, I will give your company one last chance to fix this. I want a formal meeting with the CEO, the executive leadership, and an FAA representative. Before 10 a.m. tomorrow. Benjamin answered, his voice shaking. That will not be possible. Lauren smiled, cold and controlled. Then I will make it possible my own way. She hung up. 3 minutes later, a message from Daniel appeared. We'd just obtained an internal email between Aurora managers. Do you want to see it? Lauren, send it. The email opened. Only a few lines, but enough to ignite everything Lauren had spent the entire day trying to contain. Don't worry. People like her always complain when they don't get special treatment. Just give her the standard voucher. She'll stop. Lauren read the sentence twice, 3 times. People like her. A phrase she had heard her entire life. A beautiful but invisible weapon, sharp enough to cut her in the same place every time. In their eyes, Lauren was not a CEO. Not the founder of the system they were using. Not the architect of 70% of North America's flight operations. In their eyes, she was just a black woman asking for too much. And in that moment, Lauren Harris no longer tried to stay calm. She stood up, not hurriedly, but with a weight that seemed to tilt the room around her. She picked up her phone and sent Daniel a message. Prepare the emergency protocol, but do not activate. I will give the order at the exact moment. Daniel replied immediately. Lauren, that step will cause massive disruption. She answered with one sentence. Disruption is the only language the powerful but heartless understand. Lauren closed her phone. She walked to the glass wall and looked out at the glowing Manhattan skyline below. They had spent the entire day reminding her that they believed she did not belong in first class. But tomorrow they would learn exactly where she belonged. Not seat 2A, not seat 34B, but in the position of the person who could bring all of Aurora Air to its knees with a single technical command. Lauren placed her hand on the glass. Her gaze didn't waver. Tomorrow, she whispered, they will learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. Morning unfolded over New York, beneath a thin layer of mist, pale and hazy, like the breath of a sleeping beast. Lauren stood before the 52nd floor window of the Hudson Grand, holding a steaming cup of coffee. She had been awake all night, not from restlessness, but from a chilling clarity that left her more awake than sleep ever could. There was a cold light in her eyes, one she had never seen in herself before. Her phone vibrated. The name on the screen, Dr. Margaret Cole. Lauren drew a deep breath and answered. Lauren, you read the article this morning, didn't you? The old professor's voice held no anger, no panic. Only a deep stillness, like the quiet ocean floor, where even light struggles to reach. Yes, Lauren replied, her eyes fixed on the building across from her. Naomi Brooks, the investigative journalist Daniel had called last night, had released a report that hit like a hammer a long-term systemic pattern of racial discrimination at Aurora Air. Margaret exhaled. Everything you went through yesterday, that was just the surface. I know. And you are thinking about the thing I'm afraid you are thinking about. Lauren stayed silent. Margaret continued. The emergency diagnostic protocol is something you created to save lives, not to punish. Lauren closed her eyes, her voice low and tightly contained. But a system can save lives in another way too, by forcing the powerful to face the price of discrimination. Lauren Margaret's voice softened. You know the consequences. 152 flights, thousands of passengers, chaos. No one will be in danger, Lauren replied. The diagnostic only affects flights on the ground. No risk to anything already airborne. Every part of it is covered in the contract. But public opinion is not governed by any contract, Margaret whispered. You could be painted as the villain. They could accuse you of abusing power. Lauren opened her eyes. They held no hesitation. I have stayed silent for 20 years, she said. And in return, they still saw me as someone who needed to be double-checked at the first-class counter. She continued, each word hitting like steel. I will not be silent anymore. Margaret went quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Then at least make sure you are ready to pay the price. Lauren answered, I have never feared paying a price. I only fear paying it and changing nothing. The call ended. Lauren lowered the phone onto the table. Her hand did not shake, not even slightly. She sat down and opened her laptop. A secure window appeared, marked with a red warning, Emergency Diagnostic Protocol Confidential. The system requested high-level authentication. She entered the first code, then the second. A third window appeared. Are you certain you want to proceed? Lauren stared at the words. A small question, yet behind it lay the weight of the entire aviation industry. At that moment, a message from Daniel flashed onto her screen. Aurora Air sent their final response. No acknowledgement of discrimination, no apology, no staff suspension, no internal review, claiming the media is exaggerating the issue. You know what that means? Lauren curled her fingers slightly. She knew, all too well. Another message arrived from April. Lauren CA camera footage confirms they saw your ticket. Rachel and Tyler intentionally ignored the update. This was deliberate. Another message came in immediately after Stratocore internal email confirms it. That man knew they were trying to apply pressure on Aerosync before the contract renewal. Lauren rose from her chair. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the victim humiliated at the check-in counter. Not the woman whispered about as these people. Not the woman pushed down to seat 34B. The woman in the mirror was the one who controlled 70% of Aurora Air's flight operations. The one they had underestimated. The one for whom silence was no longer an option. She whispered, "All right." She returned to her laptop, entered the final code. A confirmation window opened. Final authorization required. Lauren placed her finger above the enter key. At that exact moment, her phone rang. Bradley Monroe, CEO of Aurora Air. She answered. "Ms. Harris, we need to talk." His voice was tight, stretched thin like a string ready to snap. Lauren responded cold as metal. You already had the chance to talk. You chose to ignore it. You don't understand. No, Lauren cut in. It is you who does not understand. She looked at her laptop screen. The enter key waited. One touch. Lauren spoke clearly, each word a blow. When your team decided to humiliate me, you forgot that I am the person who operates your sky. Bradley fell silent. Lauren continued. In the next 30 minutes you will understand exactly what I mean. She lowered the phone, placed her finger on the enter key, and then delivered the final sentence sharp as a verdict. Consequences always arrive where they belong. She pressed enter. 90000. The system initiated 90001. Skylink OS entered diagnostic mode 9004. At JFK LAX Denver Miami staff screens flashed with a red warning system freeze diagnostic mode 9020. 43 flights reported simultaneous errors. 90040 73 flights. 901 10. 152 flights held on the ground. Aurora Air's operations center erupted into chaos, staff shouting, managers scrambling, electronic boards flickering wildly, and through all the confusion, one truth rang louder than everything else. A woman pushed into seat 34B had just brought 4 major U.S. airports to a standstill. Lauren sat back down. She closed her eyes. Not from exhaustion, not from regret, but because for the first time in 20 years, a strange calm washed through her. She had refused to stay silent, and the system's silence had finally paid its price. 9:02 a.m., 2 minutes after Lauren pressed enter. At JFK Terminal 7, the first sound was not a pilot announcement, but a rapid, shrill series of beeps like an alarm. The Aurora Air check-in monitors flipped from blue to red in an instant. System override diagnostic mode. All departures suspended. Staff stumbled back, blinking in confusion. A young agent immediately called her supervisor. I can't scan boarding passes. I can't load passenger data. I can't access the flight plan. A few thought it was a temporary glitch. 5 seconds later, the entire system froze solid. And that was only JFK. In the next 90 seconds, LAX, DFW Denver, and the rest collapsed one after another. 152 flights grounded. Over 18,000 passengers stranded. Airport loudspeakers crackled with chaotic, overlapping announcements, like a song suddenly dragged off beat. Yet beneath all that noise, one chilling realization spread through Aurora Air. No one could stop the diagnostic. No one except Aerosync. No one except Lauren Harris. Aurora Air Headquarters, Dallas, Texas, 9:05 a.m. Bradley Monroe, CEO of Aurora Air, was meeting with his CFO when the conference room door burst open so hard it nearly ripped off the hinge. The head of operations rushed in, face drained of color. We're locked out, Bradley scowled. Locked out of what? The entire system. Skylink switched to diagnostic mode. No flights can take off. Bradley shot to his feet. Override it. We can't override anything. Call it they tried. They can't access the server. Bradley's face flushed red. We need to contact Aerosync. Right, the IT director swallowed hard. Ms. Harris is not answering any calls. For the first time in 15 years as CEO, Bradley felt genuine fear. FAA Headquarters, Washington, DC 9:09 a.m. What's happening with Aurora Air? An FAA engineer shouted as the data feed from 4 major airports crashed simultaneously. Thomas Richardson, a senior analyst, stared at his screen, eyes widening. This isn't a hack. It isn't a crash. This is an internal diagnostic. His superior stepped behind him. A diagnostic that halts all operations. Who triggered it? Thomas pointed at the string of authorization code on the left corner of the screen. One name appeared clear as a hammer strike, authorized by L. Harris. He whispered, "My God, the CEO of AeroSync." 1 minute later, an alert rippled through federal networks. Possible disruption initiated by software provider. Immediate oversight required. FAA Homeland Security, the Department of Transportation, all eyes turned toward one name. Hudson, Grand New York 9, 12 a.m. Lauren stood before the mirror for the second time that morning. She adjusted her collar, tightened her hair, drew a long, steady breath. In the reflection, she no longer saw the woman pushed down to seat 34B. She saw the woman who made 152 flights kneel to acknowledge a truth they had ignored. Discrimination has a cost, and today that cost was enormous. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Aurora's CEO wants a meeting. They've called an emergency session at the New York headquarters. FAA and Homeland Security will be present. Lauren read the message, then set the phone down as if it was something minor. "Prepare the car," she said, her voice calm as morning water. 10:03 a.m. Aurora Air Headquarters, New York. The glass facade reflected Lauren's figure as she walked in, straight sharp, composed. No employee dared lift their head to look at her. The receptionist swallowed hard, voice cracking. They're waiting for you in the main conference room. Lauren entered the elevator. No words, no trembling, no rush. The doors opened to a scene stretched across the corridor. Pale faces, executives whispering urgently, staff on frantic phone calls, and at the end of the hallway the glass conference room where everyone waited as if for the verdict of their own fate. Daniel stood outside, giving her a small nod. "Ready," Lauren replied. "Since last night." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Let's go." Inside the conference room, the air felt thick, heavy as fog. 12 men and women in expensive suits turned toward her. On the large screen, a map displayed 152 red dots, each representing a grounded flight. Bradley Monroe sat in the center eyes, bloodshot from anger and panic. When Lauren stepped inside, the room grew so silent they could hear the door click shut behind her. Bradley shot up from his chair. "Ms. Harris, do you realize what you've done?" Lauren raised one hand, not high, not forcefully, just a simple raise. But it silenced him instantly, as if someone had muted the world. Lauren pulled out a chair and sat across from them. No apology, no explanation, no preamble. She spoke only one sentence, and it froze the entire room. "Now you finally understand what it feels like to be held in a place you do not deserve to sit in." No one spoke. No one dared. Lauren continued, her voice even sharp as a freshly honed blade. "For the past 18 months, 27 black executives have been treated like criminals simply because they held first-class tickets. You called it security screening. You called it protocol. You called it a system error." She leaned forward slightly. "But when I freeze your system for 30 minutes, you call it a crisis." Bradley swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken to him that way. No one had dared. Lauren scanned their faces. Her gaze was so sharp, even the most seasoned CFOs, COOs, and VPs seemed suddenly small. "So tell me," she said, her voice dropping, "when you humiliated me at the first-class counter, when your staff said, 'People like her,' when you refused to apologize, did any of you think about consequences?" Silence. Lauren smiled, cold and razor-thin. "I did." An FAA representative finally spoke. "We are not here to take sides, but what we see is clear evidence of systemic discrimination." A Homeland Security officer added, and Stratocore appears to have interfered with passenger experience to undermine aerosync. That will be investigated. Bradley gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles whitened. He knew there was no escape. Lauren stood. The room froze once more. "You want to end this chaos?" she asked. All 12 heads nodded at once. "Then listen carefully." Her voice sharpened like metal striking stone. "I did not stop the sky. You did that to yourselves through your own disregard." Then she delivered the final line, a verdict more powerful than any shouted accusation. "If you want the sky to move again, you will have to change the ground first." The air inside the conference room thickened like molten metal, so tense that a single touch could have set it off. Lauren stood before the 12 senior executives of Aurora Air, the same people who just a day earlier believed she was merely someone standing in the wrong first-class line. They were no longer sitting straight, no longer folding their arms, no longer projecting power. They waited. They waited for judgment from the woman they had underestimated most. Bradley Monroe struggled to swallow the fear tightening around his throat. "Ms. Harris," he cleared his voice, trying to reclaim his leadership posture. We can negotiate. We can fix this. All you need to do is disable the diagnostic." And Lauren lifted her hand slightly. A small gesture, yet it silenced the entire room, as if someone had ordered the world to stop breathing. Mr. Monroe Lauren said, her voice frighteningly calm in the past 2 years. 27 black passengers have filed complaints about discriminatory treatment by Aurora Air. She placed a thick folder on the glass table. Every complaint, every testimony, every number. You ignored them. The HR director trembled. That could have been a misunderstanding. Lauren turned her gaze toward the woman. Oh, a misunderstanding that their first-class seats malfunctioned. A misunderstanding that their boarding passes were invalid. Or perhaps a misunderstanding that they were standing in the wrong line. The woman lowered her head, unable to respond. Lauren walked slowly along the table, tapping her finger against the glass like a ticking countdown. "I have spent my entire life enduring misunderstandings like these." She stopped directly in front of Bradley, her eyes never leaving his. "But I am not enduring them anymore." Suddenly, a notification chimed from the large monitor. A new email appeared, sent from an internal anonymous source, all Seattle camera footage uploaded. Clear evidence Tyler and Rachel intentionally ignored Ms. Harris's boarding pass. Lauren glanced at the screen, then back at Bradley. What is left to call a misunderstanding. Now Bradley blinked rapidly, sweat collecting at his temple under the lights. "Ms. Harris, we will review this. We will conduct an internal investigation." Lauren laughed. It was not a laugh of amusement, but the laugh of someone who had witnessed too much hypocrisy. "No, Mr. Monroe. You will not review. You will do the following." She pulled out a chair and sat at the head of the table, as if she had always belonged there. "I will list each requirement. You will record each one. There will be no negotiation." The legal director opened his laptop, his hands shaking. Lauren began. 1. Immediate termination of Tyler Boone and Rachel King. No suspension. No investigation. Termination. Today. They were the center of the humiliation yesterday. One executive attempted a weak objection, but Lauren did not let him finish. Her eyes sharpened like a drawn blade. "There is no but. They deliberately degraded a passenger. I want the termination document signed today." The head of legal bowed his head. "Why, yes." 2. Public acknowledgement of systemic discrimination. Bradley burst out. "Lauren, that will destroy the company. That is the truth," Lauren replied without blinking. "And you cannot repair a system you are too cowardly to admit is broken." The PR director stammered. "Are you on a press release?" Lauren nodded. In that statement, Aurora Air must issue a public apology, acknowledge the discriminatory pattern, commit to full structural reform. A desperate sigh echoed somewhere in the room, but no one dared oppose her. 3. Mandatory anti-bias training with measurable outcomes. Lauren spoke clearly. Not a 45-minute online module, not a checklist test. I want a certified program independently audited with quantifiable metrics. The FAA representative took notes rapidly. Homeland Security nodded. Bradley softened his tone. "We will review the budget." Lauren shook her head. "No, you will prioritize it as a requirement for continuing to operate Skylink OS." No one argued. 4. Hire a chief diversity officer with my consultation. The room froze. Bradley's face darkened. "Lauren, you want to influence our personnel decisions. I want someone with real authority, not a figurehead. And I want one guarantee." Lauren leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. "That this person understands what it means to be underestimated, to be told they do not belong, to be treated the way I and 27 others have been." Bradley could not speak. The FAA spoke instead. "This is a reasonable requirement." Bradley nodded reluctantly, as if swallowing a bitter pill. 5. Integrate a behavioral monitoring module into Skylink OS. The entire room jolted, as if struck by electricity. "WW, what exactly do you want?" the CFO asked. His voice strained. Lauren delivered the words slowly, each one hitting the table like a weight. "This module will track employee behavior during passenger interactions, processing time, verification, intensity, priority levels, demographic comparisons." Someone protested. "This is surveillance," Lauren replied. "No, this is transparency." Her voice rang like metal on stone. "You allowed discrimination to hide behind the phrase system error. From today forward, the system will expose it." No one spoke again. And then, the final condition, the most severe. Lauren locked eyes with Bradley. "I will restore your system the moment all these requirements are signed. Not a single line missing." Bradley gripped the armrests until his knuckles whitened. His voice cracked. "Lauren, you're extorting us." "No," Lauren said gently. "I am holding you accountable." A Homeland Security officer added, "If these terms are not met, the federal investigation will continue and expand." Bradley's shoulders collapsed. He understood. The company had only 2 choices: sign and survive. 2, refuse and die right here. Lauren crossed her arms. Her final words drifted through the room like a quiet but undeniable sentence. "This is not a negotiation. This is correction." 12 minutes later, every document was signed. No one dared read closely. No one dared hesitate. They signed as though signing the certificate that Aurora Air had been forced to kneel today. Daniel placed the completed file in front of Lauren. "It's done." Lauren nodded. "Good. Prepare to restore the system." She rose from her chair. "But remember one thing." She scanned the room, her gaze sharp as a laser. "This is not a victory. This is the first warning." When Lauren left the conference room, she closed the large glass door behind her gently, yet the sound echoed through the long hallway, like a period marking the end of an era. In less than an hour after the terms were signed, Aurora Air restored the Skylink system. The screen slowly shifted from red to green boarding passes, scanned again, flights lined up one after another to resume operations. But normalcy didn't return. It never would. News erupted like a grenade. 10:47 a.m., the first press release from Aurora Air appeared on Twitter, CNN, CNBC, and the New York Times simultaneously. Aurora Air formally apologizes for discriminatory incidents in passenger service. We acknowledge that our system has had serious failures in the treatment of passengers of color, especially those traveling in premium cabins. The airline commits to a comprehensive reformation to ensure fairness and respect. Within 7 minutes, hashtags Dachshur Aurora Air exposed. Flyfair, unsure justice for passengers, ignited like wildfire across a dry forest. Breaking news alerts followed in rapid succession. Major airline forced by software CEO to admit racial discrimination. 152 flights halted due to bias, and the lesson delivered by a black female CEO. When technology forces the aviation industry to face the truth. Among the dozens of analysis videos and millions of readers, one quote from Lauren was repeated the most. They do not respect patience. They only respect consequences. No one knew whom she said it to, but it struck a nerve shared by thousands who had suffered silent humiliation. Stratocorp collapses under federal investigation. By that afternoon, Homeland Security officially opened a case against Stratocorp. The leaked emails exposed during the meeting, the emails intentionally setting up Aurora Air to damage Aerosync's reputation and destabilize the contract renewal, were all collected. Stephen Adler, COO of Stratocorp, was summoned for questioning. Rumors said he left the building pale-faced, visibly shaken. CNN reported Stratocorp servers frozen after accusations of coordinating discriminatory treatment of passengers to sabotage rival firm. The Stratocorp board held an emergency 3-hour meeting. The result, Stephen Adler was suspended indefinitely. Stratocorp's stock price plummeted 27% in one afternoon. Aurora Air shakes under the pressure of reform. Meanwhile, at Aurora Air, a full-scale internal purge began immediately. Tyler Boone and Rachel King were publicly fired. No internal announcement, no explanation. Their names vanished from the system within hours. An anonymous employee told reporters, "I've never seen our CEO look this terrified. They walked around the operations center looking like ghosts." Mid-level managers were summoned. They were interrogated with questions that made everyone break into cold sweat. Whom have you told your staff to double-check? Has discrimination been routinely practiced? Who allowed this to continue for 18 months? A regional director broke down in tears after being questioned for the 4th time. A cultural reform plan was activated. Aurora Air announced a 90-day roadmap to restructure the customer care division, launch an intensive anti-bias training program, install a transparency oversight board supervised by the FAA, and recruit a qualified chief diversity officer. There was no other choice, because standing before them was not just Lauren, it was the entire industry watching. As for Lauren, she did not celebrate, did not claim victory, did not act triumphant. Lauren returned to the hotel at midday. No fanfare, no crowd. No one knew that the revolution America was discussing had been orchestrated by the woman quietly unlocking this hotel room. She set her bag down, sank onto the bed, and closed her eyes. Daniel texted, "You just changed an entire system." But Lauren did not reply. Not because she felt superior, but because the truth was simpler. The fight was far from over. It had only begun. She knew Aurora Air would try to dodge responsibility. She knew the media would dissect her actions. She knew people would call her dangerous, abusive, or too extreme. But she also knew something far more important today, The people who had once been humiliated at check-in counters were finally seen, finally heard, finally believed. And that thought made her open her eyes again. The next morning, when the sky had completely changed, Lauren sat at the desk, watching a live broadcast from the FAA. The spokesperson addressed dozens of reporters. Reports show Aurora Air violated standards of fair passenger service. The FAA will require a deep structural reform and will conduct continuous oversight for 2 years. A reporter asked, "What about AeroSync? Did they abuse their authority by triggering the diagnostic?" The spokesperson answered clearly, "No. The diagnostic is part of the Safety Operations Clause. AeroSync acted in full compliance with contractual regulations." Lauren exhaled, not a sigh of relief, but the closing breath of a chapter. From this moment on, no one could touch her credibility. Not Stratocorp, not Aurora Air, not anyone who had ever thought she was weak. Lauren whispered to herself, "All right, now let's rebuild." And that is how Part 9 ends, not with victory, but with determination, transforming consequences into lasting change. Setting the stage for the moment, she returns to the airport and faces Emily in the next part. 3 weeks after the Sky Standstill event, Seattle rested under a warm spring sun. The roadside trees had grown thick with bright green leaves, reflecting softly across the airport windows, like a peaceful painting, a piece completely opposite to the storm Lauren had unleashed on the aviation industry just 3 weeks earlier. Lauren pulled her suitcase into the first-class area of Aurora Air. She did not need her boarding pass pulled up on the screen. She knew every employee here had been instructed that if there was one name they had to treat with absolute protocol, it was Lauren Harris. But today, she didn't walk in as the woman who controlled the skies. Today she entered simply as a passenger. Or at least she hoped to. She didn't walk fast. She didn't walk slow. Just enough to breathe in the air of the place where she had once been humiliated and which now had changed because of her. When she reached the counter, the staff member looked up and his eyes widened instantly. "Ms. Harris." His voice cracked with a trace of fear. Lauren smiled politely. "I have a first-class ticket to San Francisco." The employee nodded so fast his head almost bobbed. "Oh yes, of course, W. Would you like a coffee or water?" "I can." Lauren placed her hand lightly on the counter, just enough for him to stop. "There's no need to be nervous. Just follow the proper procedure." He nodded, relieved as though he had been pardoned. Lauren took her boarding pass, thanked him, and pulled her suitcase toward security. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Perfect in a way that felt unreal, as if the entire world was trying not to upset her. But she was not here to feel powerful. She was here for something else, something that appeared right at the boarding gate. A familiar silhouette, a familiar expression, a pair of eyes that once looked away when Lauren asked for a bottle of water. Emily Saunders, the flight attendant from that day, the one who whispered "these people," the one who had forced Lauren to clench her jaw for 5 hours straight on the flight to New York. Emily stood leaning against a pillar hands, clutching her clipboard. When she saw Lauren, the color drained from her face. Lauren stopped walking, did not avoid her. Emily walked toward her, each step feeling twice as heavy as her own weight. Standing in front of Lauren, she tried to speak, but her voice came out strangled. "I don't know where to begin." Lauren said nothing. She simply looked at her, not cold, not angry, but not forgiving either. A look that made Emily inhale sharply. "I read the statements," Emily said, voice trembling. "I saw the evidence, and I had to sit through 3 weeks of mandatory training I never thought I would ever have to take. She swallowed. And I realized I have been carrying so many biases without even knowing it. I was wrong. Completely wrong. I'm sorry for how I treated you. There is no excuse. Lauren stayed silent for a few more seconds. That silence nearly brought tears to Emily's eyes. Lauren finally asked, "Do you truly understand why that day was wrong?" Emily lowered her gaze. A tear fell onto her clipboard. "I think I do. It wasn't just wrong to you. It was wrong to anyone I looked at with a categorizing stare." Lauren studied her not to judge, but to measure whether the apology came from fear or awareness. Lauren said, "I once believed punishment through power was the only way to change a system." Emily lifted her eyes, red and raw. "But I've realized something." Lauren continued. "Fixing a system is not just firing people. Fixing a system is making people look into the darkness inside themselves." Emily whispered, "If you want to report me, I understand." Lauren shook her head. "I didn't come here to take your job." Emily stared at her in disbelief. Lauren continued, "Punishment makes people afraid, but opportunity makes people change." Emily released a long breath, so relieved she had to grip the wall to steady herself. Lauren spoke the final sentence light as a breeze, yet heavy as a warning. "From now on, treat passengers who don't look like you the way you hope people treat you." Emily wiped her eyes, nodding over and over. "I promise. I'll do better. I'll be better." Lauren did not smile. She did not comfort her. She simply nodded just enough to show she heard she accepted, and she had chosen to release the weight of what remained. She walked away. Emily stood there for a long time, as if an old layer of skin had just been peeled away, revealing the person the system had never taught her to become. Final moment, when a woman sees a new sky. When Lauren entered the first-class cabin this time, with no suspicious looks cast her way, she paused at the doorway. The captain stepped out to greet passengers, a black woman, around 45, strong posture uniform, crisp and sharp. She smiled at Lauren with the warmest expression Lauren had ever seen on an Aurora Air flight. "Welcome aboard," the captain said. "Ms. Harris, is that right? I wanted to thank you." Lauren tilted her head slightly. "For what?" The captain replied. "For helping this airline change so people like me can finally stand in the positions we worked hard to deserve." Lauren hesitated. A faint sting rose behind her eyes. She said only, "Thank you for flying safely for all of us." The captain nodded and returned to the cockpit. Lauren took her seat 2A, the seat she had once been denied. The aircraft rolled toward the runway. Sunlight streamed through the window, brushing across Lauren's hand. She looked outside at Aurora airplanes preparing for departure, with a new slogan printed boldly along the fuselage, "Everyone belongs in the sky." And for the first time since being pushed into seat 34B, Lauren let her shoulders relax, placed her hand over her chest and whispered, "Finally the sky is learning to be fair." The engines roared louder, the plane surged forward, and Lauren Harris, the woman who made an entire system confront itself, closed her eyes, peaceful, as though she had restored the world to the order it was always meant to have.